Welcome to the deep dive, where we cut through the noise and really deliver the key insights from a whole stack of sources picked just for you. Today, we're doing a deep dive into the relationship between Mexico and Honduras. It's fascinating, often complex. You might see them as just neighbors. But our mission here is to unpack all those intricate connections, diplomacy, economics, and yeah, even those intense football rivalries. Get ready to explore the layers that really define their shared story.
That's right. What we're aiming for today is really giving you a full picture, a comprehensive understanding of what connects these two nations and sometimes what sets them apart. Think of this deep dive as your shortcut to getting genuinely well-informed on a relationship that, well, as you'll see, has a lot more twists and turns than you might expect just looking from the outside.
Okay, let's unpack this then. To really get Mexico and Honduras, you have to start way back. Their shared history, both nations came out of the same colonial situation, right? The Virreinato de Nueva España, New Spain, that was Spain's huge territory covering a lot of North and Central America. And they both declared independence from Spain in the same year, 1821. It's kind of a historical footnote, but Honduras was actually part of the first Mexican Empire for a bit. Super short-lived, though, only until 1823.
Yeah, ephemeral is the word. It collapsed pretty quickly. Lots of internal conflict. People weren't really behind the whole empire thing.
Right. So after that, Honduras joined the United Provinces of Central America for a while before becoming fully independent in 1838. And underneath all that political shifting, they share this deep Mesoamerican cultural heritage, mostly Catholic faith too, and figures like Cortez and Alvarado were involved in both areas.
Exactly. And that shared history, that deep bond, it really laid the essential groundwork for their formal relationship. Diplomatic ties were officially set up on April 25, 1879. That's pretty early on, showing they recognized that shared connection. Over time, those missions grew, becoming full embassies in 1943. And today, both countries have a really strong consular presence. Honduras, for instance, has consulates all over Mexico in key spots to help its citizens, especially migrants in transit. That big network really highlights the ongoing need for support on both sides. And you see the long history in early agreements, too, like that 1908 Friendship, Commerce, and Navigation Treaty. That was important for setting rules for trade and travel early on.
That level of engagement is, wow, it's pretty impressive. It goes way beyond just formal diplomacy, doesn't it? Across so many areas. We're talking agreements covering culture, judicial stuff, education, science, security. What strikes me isn't just like how many agreements there are, but how wide-ranging they are. You've got tourism cooperation from 1990, fighting drug trafficking also from 1990, then specific pacts on scientific and technical cooperation, educational and cultural cooperation later in the 90s. And then into the 2000s, you see these really significant legal agreements, joint execution of criminal sentences in '03, mutual legal assistance in criminal matters in '04, and maybe critically, that maritime delimitation agreement in 2005. So, if you had to pick one that was maybe particularly transformative, what would you point to?
That's a good question, because it's easy to just list them off, right? But that Maritime Delimitation Treaty from 2005, for instance, that wasn't just signing a paper. It actually resolved some long-standing border issues at sea. And that kind of resolution is huge because it opens the door for things like joint economic zones, maybe, where both can benefit from resources, or better security cooperation in waters that were maybe disputed before. It really helped them work together without those territorial gray areas.
Absolutely. And that cooperation, that spirit really flows into the economy too, doesn't it? A huge piece is the Free Trade Agreement of the Northern Triangle. That pact, set up in 2000, effective 2001, initially, Mexico, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, then Costa Rica and Nicaragua joined later. That created a pretty significant regional trade bloc.
It really did.
And the trade volume, it's substantial. U.S. $2.2 billion in 2023. Honduras exporting things like cables, sugar, textiles. Mexico sending electrical cables, petroleum products, vehicles. But what's really telling, I think, is the presence of major Mexican companies, America Mobile, Cemex, Bimbo, Gruma, operating in Honduras. That's not just trade. That's deep investment, intertwined economies.
Precisely. And, beyond the formal agreements and the economic links, these two nations also face some really complex shared challenges. Migration is a huge one. Honduras is a key part of the Northern Triangle, right? That region with high migration rates, mostly heading towards the U.S. And naturally, many of those routes go straight through Mexico. So collaboration on migration, on security, on development, it's just a critical connection point. People are moving for lots of reasons, seeking better economic chances, obviously, but also tragically fleeing crime and gang violence, specifically groups like MS-13, Mar and Salvatrucha.
That sounds like a really vital area for them to work together. So how are they, actively cooperating on such a tough issue?
Well, they've significantly ramped up mutual cooperation. Things like providing legal and humanitarian help to Honduran migrants who are in Mexico,
Hmm.
and also working together to combat human trafficking and the violence migrants face.
Mm.
There's even an agreement specifically to tackle Mexican cartels operating in Honduras. The scale of the migration itself is just, well, striking. Look at the numbers. 2014, over 33,000 Hondurans deported from Mexico. Fast forward to 2018, over 640 Hondurans asked for asylum in Mexico. But then by 2023, that number just exploded to over 40,000 requesting asylum.
Wow.
That massive jump really tells you something about the pressures driving people out.
And like any close relationship, any dynamic one, there are going to be moments of friction, right? Like in 2024, Honduras pulled its ambassador from Ecuador. That was in solidarity with Mexico after the raid on Mexico's embassy in Quito.
A significant gesture.
And we also saw that big diplomatic crisis back in 2009 around the coup d'etat in Honduras. Mexico backed the ousted president, Manuel Zelaya, let his ambassador in. That definitely strained things for a while.
True. But despite those, occasional rough patches, the steady stream of high-level visits really shows the relationship's resilience. You see top officials going back and forth consistently. Mexican Foreign Minister Ebrard went to Honduras for President Castro's inauguration in January 2022. Then President López Obrador visited Honduras just a few months later, May 2022.
Right.
And more recently, Honduran President Castro came to Mexico for a migration summit in October 23, and then again for President Sheinbaum's inauguration in October 24. This constant engagement, even through leadership changes, it signals a real, deep, ongoing commitment to talking and working together.
Okay, so we've touched on diplomacy, the economy, these really serious shared challenges. But what happens when, that national passion takes over away from the negotiating tables? This is where the story gets, well, really compelling, I think, because the Mexico-Honduras relationship just ignites on the football pitch. And it's more than just sports rivalry, isn't it? It kind of embodies that clash of national identities and maybe even amplifies some of the social and economic stuff we've talked about.
Oh, absolutely. And it's fascinating just looking at the numbers, the stats that define the history here. Across, at least 47 recorded matches, Mexico definitely has the lead. 29 wins, 9 draws, 9 losses for Honduras. But, and this is a key part, despite that statistical edge for Mexico, Honduras has pulled off some really impactful victories that makes the rivalry unpredictable, keeps it vibrant, and resonates so deeply with national pride on both sides.
You're so right. And those impactful wins, they've created legendary moments. The Aztecazos, right?
Yeah.
Think back to 2001, when Costa Rica had already shocked Mexico at the Azteca Stadium, their fortress. Then Honduras comes in and delivers a 3-1 blow right there in Mexico City. That actually cost the Mexican coach his job, brought in Javier Aguirre.
A huge moment.
Then again in 2013, another Aztecazo. Honduras beats Mexico 2-1 in Mexico City, famously helped by that mistake from the goalie, Corona. These aren't just scores in a book. They're like cultural benchmarks. They capture that whole underdog spirit, the thrill of the upset.
And bringing it right up to recent times, we saw it again in the Nations League in 2024. Honduras surprised Mexico again, 2-0 win at the Azteca. Luis Palma got both goals, beat Ochoa twice. Interestingly, that match got heated. Javier Aguirre actually got hit by a bottle thrown from the crowd. Shows you the intensity. Wow. Mexico did come back strong in the return leg, won 4-0 to advance, but that first leg was a shocker. And if you look at the Copa Oro, the Gold Cup, their first semifinal clash was 2011. Mexico won that 2-0, but it went to extra time. And then the big one recently, the 2025 Copa Oro semis at Levi Stadium. Mexico, the defending champs, come off a win against Saudi Arabia. Honduras had just edged out Panama in penalties under Ronaldo Rueda. The betting odds heavily favored Mexico, but the Honduran player, Choco Lozano, he put it perfectly. He said something like, yeah, Mexico's favored, but in the field, everything can happen.
So with all that history, that intensity, what are the sort of typical tactics we see when they play each other? What's the dynamic on the pitch?
Well, it's often a pretty clear contrast in styles, actually. Mexico, they usually dominate possession. You'll see them holding the ball maybe 70% of the time. They have clear attacking structures. They try to build patiently. And they tend to be pretty solid defensively, too. Low expected goals against, meaning they don't give up many easy chances. Honduras, on the other hand, often plays more transitionally. They focus on being really organized defensively, staying compact, and then hitting hard and fast on the counterattack. We saw that in their big games. Makes for a really interesting tactical battle.
Yeah, that's a classic clash of styles, isn't it? Always compelling. And who are the key figures, the players, the coaches, who really define this rivalry now?
Well, for Mexico, you've got coaches like Javier Aguirre, known for trying to bring in younger players, refresh the squad, like debuting the youth player Gilberto Mora in 2025. Key players currently, figures like Raul Jimenez, Alexis Vega up front, strong defenders like Cesar Montes, Johan Vasquez, trying to keep that balance. For Honduras, Coach Reinaldo Rueda is huge. He's tactically sharp and actually has a pretty good historical record against Mexico, which is interesting. And player-wise, definitely Luis Palma after that Nations League brace. Choco Lozano, obviously. Edric Meshivar in goal is usually key for them too. Daniil Maldonado in defense.
You know, what's so interesting to me, thinking about all this, is the cultural side of the rivalry. You have this incredible intensity, right? This national pride boiling over during the 90 minutes. But then off the pitch, there seems to be this underlying social respect. You see players chatting normally after the game. It feels like, as someone put it, the rivalry is more football related than in real life. It's a fascinating contrast, isn't it? Competition and respect side by side.
Absolutely. And if you pull back and look at the whole picture, the Mexico-Honduras relationship is this really compelling mix. You've got deep diplomatic cooperation, strong economic ties, and yes, this incredibly passionate, totally legitimate football rivalry.
Yeah.
All these layers woven together, it makes for a very dynamic, constantly evolving connection.
Yeah, exactly. Despite the history, the challenges, those occasional diplomatic bumps, you see the political dialogue, the economic links pulling them together. But then on the pitch, boom, that sporting passion just lights up national pride like nothing else. It creates these moments that echo way beyond the final score.
And looking forward, these countries will undoubtedly keep strengthening those economic and social ties. They have to,
Yeah.
right, to face shared regional challenges, migration, transporter issues, all that.
Yeah.
And you can bet on it, they'll keep giving us these memorable clashes on the football field that stir up all that emotion and national pride.
So just think about that, how all these different things, ancient shared roots, formal treaties, billions in trade, and then a single goal in a football match, how they all come together to define and maybe even reshape the story of these two connected nations. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? Where else in the world do you find these complex, layered relationships playing out, blending policy and pure passion in quite the same way?